It's that time again, America. The Game Awards, TGAs, as Mr. Jeff Keighley likes to call them. The nominations for 2022 are here. And I don't think we need to read all of them, all of the categories and all of the nominations, but I think that we should talk about some of them here. The Game Awards, I feel like, they're an interesting event. I always want them to be better than they are. I feel like we've talked about that a lot on this show about like how while the showcases themselves are decent at best, usually like the actual awards part of it is always so like sidelined that it hardly feels like why even do an award? Like why not just make this your winter showcase, Mr. Keighley? But so they make a big deal out of announcing all this stuff. But I guess the one big front runner here is that God of War Ragnarok has how many nominations here? 10 nominations, and then followed by Elden Ring, which has I think 8 or 9, and then Horizon Forbidden West, which has just a few less. How do you feel about this? Yeah, and then I want to hear like just your like initial thoughts on this, and then I want to talk about the specific categories and talk about some of the games on here.
So I'm just looking at which categories God of War was nominated in and not Elden Ring. Best performance for both Christopher Judge and Sonny Soljic. Is that Atreus?
Yeah.
They were both nominated. And obviously there's not a character in Elden Ring that is, let's say, a best performance category nominee.
Dude, I don't know. You're laughing. It got nominated for like best narrative.
But can't you see that? I mean, George R. Martin came in there and he wrote up that script of like, "What up, guys?" Like he came up with that.
I get it. It is the most coherent FromSoft game.
Low bar, Peter.
But like that's the thing. Like, but it's not. You know what I mean? Like I understand like on a basic level of like the 3 story beats in that game, but like it's certainly the most written. Like there's a lot of writing in it, but I don't. But like a good narrative that does not make, you know.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fucking writing in Lord of the Rings, but those books are tough. Are a dry read. But
Elden Ring was nominated for best role playing game, while God of War was best action adventure. But the one that God of War got nominated for that Elden Ring did not was the accessibility award, innovations in accessibility. And that's an interesting list of itself because those nominees were As Dusk Falls, God of War Ragnarok, Return to Monkey Island, The Last of Us Part 1, and The Quarry were all nominated for that. So I think that's an interesting kind of like trend there. A couple of adventure games and a couple of Sony first party games as well.
It's been, I think that Sony's push to make their games more accessible has been excellent. I agree. And I think, to be honest, I mean, like we're going to, also heads up, listener, we're going to be doing our predictions episode for this in a few weeks. We've got, Justin's going to be out of town, so we're going to put one of these in the bank. And we'll get back to the news the week after. But so we'll get into our full extended like predictions and thoughts on this, like category by category, in 2 weeks here. But just off the hip, I think that Last of Us Part 1, while like God of War has a lot of great accessibility stuff, and the other ones do as well, like in terms of like just being completely 100% like devoted to that stuff, Last of Us Part 1 like has the descriptive audio, like it is just truly like you can just tweak every little detail about the combat in that game and the interactions you have with that stuff. It's truly impressive. Not that the rest aren't, but just from the hip, that seems kind of what I would lean to.
Yeah, didn't Last of Us Part 2 win as well?
Yeah, it did.
So, I mean, you add, I mean, really, one might justify the reason they needed to make Last of Us Part 1 was to add these accessibility features. Yeah. I mean, so, yeah, I think that's, you know, again, go you, Naughty Dog, go you, Sony. Those are great. Share them with everyone.
So I want to read a few things here, and obviously, like we can talk a little bit about our predictions. Obviously, that will be devoted to that episode in a few weeks here. But I want to read at least the full nominees for Game of the Year, Game Direction, Best Narrative, and I think maybe best performance here, just to get your take here. So game of the year, we've got A Plague Tale Requiem, which, by the way, did you know Asobo Studio? I thought I was right about this, and then for whatever reason I convinced myself that I was wrong, and turns out I was right the whole time. They also make Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Those games are similar.
Very different. So I wonder if those are different teams. But so you got Plague Tale Requiem, you got Elden Ring. This is for Game of the Year. A Plague Tale Requiem, Elden Ring, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, Stray, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3. How do you take that?
I think I look at this list personally, and I feel like it's very hard to see a game that's sticking up above the others as being like, I'm the game of the year, friends. And that doesn't mean they're all on the same level, I don't think, but
to me, other than I think Stray and I think Xenoblade Chronicles 3 being on here was a welcome surprise, but not one that I think like, hey, shout out to
that
stuff.
shit.
Yeah, me too. It actually has a decent amount of representation in these categories. But like apart from Stray, and I guess maybe Xenoblade, the other 4 of these seem to be very like the most obvious picks, in my opinion, for this sort of thing. And I get that the Game Awards are kind of like that. You know, they tend to go for the more like obvious things, but it just, I don't know. There's something about this where it's like, oh, well, yeah, I guess the games that had the most money thrown at them probably would be nominated, huh? I guess, you know, Stray is the outlier there, but do you know what I mean? I don't know.
I think Stray is a weird inclusion on this list, personally. I love Stray. I thought it was a great game. I just don't know, like, looking at this, like...
You know what this feels like to me? To be entirely honest with you? I think I always find it odd when people talk about, like, something being a bad year for video games, because generally, like, I mean, for the past, like, 6, 7, 8 years, like, it's been pretty good. Like, video game fans have been like eating pretty well. For me, this personally is not my favorite year in gaming, but I think we are definitely feeling the effects of the pandemic in terms of like release schedules. Stray feels like a weird inclusion because the rest of these games, because like I feel like there have been so few of these big budget games that released this year. You know what I mean? Like this is kind of it. I don't really know what else you would be even able to put in here other than these ones. And so that's how I think you get something like Stray and Xenoblade Chronicles 3 in there, because none of these like super huge, super like wide appeal games really released this year. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think I look at these games and I think they're all good games. Like I think this is a strong list. I mean, and I think part of the reason is that I played all these games. And like there are good things about all of them. I think there are some that don't have a fart's chance in the wind of winning. But I think that I can make an argument for almost all of these games, but 2. That would be Stray and A Plague Tale are the 2 that I would have a hard time making any kind of argument for. And I think you would also add Horizon to that too. I'm pretty sure.
I would say that I could make an argument for Stray. I haven't played Plague Tale Requiem, but yeah, I would say with Plague Tale Requiem, based on just what I've seen about it, especially when compared to these other games, and Horizon, I wouldn't be able to really gun it, like be able to like really get behind. But I think Stray it would be fucking insane if that game won. But hey, last year It Takes Two won, so
I mean that is like, true. That could happen, and I think people like Stray enough that it might be the dark horse here. Was last year a bad year in video games? I mean, fucking It Takes Two won.
No, it was not a bad year in video games. Everyone, despite like not trying to be a contrarian here, but like everyone I know was like, this is a bad year for video games. This is a bad year for video games. It was not. It was definitely not. It was you got Resident Evil Village, you've got Returnal, like fucking like goatee, like instant classic Returnal. You had Ratchet and Clank, which I know you really liked. It was not a bad year for games at all. So then we got Best Game Direction, got Elden Ring, God of War, Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, Immortality, and Stray. So like literally just slotted in Plague Tale Requiem for Immortality. I always think game direction is interesting. let me go on. Best narrative: Plague Tale: Requiem, Elden Ring, God of War: Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, Immortality. Do you kind of see? I know that a lot of these games get nominated for multiple things, and this is not a completely unique year for this sort of thing, where like a lot of the big budget games get nominated for most of these things for the same things over and over again. But I feel like there have been so many games that have come out this year that to just sort of limit them to these, 4 or 5, to me feels a little like limiting. I'm glad that Immortality is in here at the very least for something like something like narrative and game direction and whatnot, because hey, yeah, that was a big swing of a game. But I think I find it like, I don't know. Do you see what I'm saying about just like the repeating of all of these same 4 or 5 titles just over and over again?
Yeah, I mean, my response to that would be, what else would be under best narrative, best game direction and stuff? And I mean, I'm sure there'd be other ones. I'm not saying that to be like, these are the only games. I think what would be the replacement games? And I think like looking at best game direction, there are so few games that are known for their game directors and known for like what they do with it. I mean, I think you look at this list here. I think God of War Ragnarok, I think that one we're looking at like game direction, and we're looking at like what they've done with that game. And I think one of the things we talked about with that game is how creative they do things like with their one shot, and how they are really like, I think in this game, stepping up how they dealt with that from the last game in such a unique way. I think a game like Immortality, I think that one is one that really kind of makes sense for like a game direction, because who's the director of that?
Sam Barlow.
We know his name. You know what I mean? That's part of it. Like, how many games like that have named directors that we know that are like interesting, quality games that are not that other games aren't quality, but like there's just something about like things that are to the level of Elden Ring or God of War or even Horizon Forbidden West that just go above and beyond what is expected of a video game. And I think like for me, like looking at a game like God of War, as much as I seem like, oh, that game sucks, that game's like a freaking 10 out of 10 still. You know what I mean? Like, and like the amount of like effort and like details in that game, the amount of thought that goes into a game like that, I think is outstanding. And that does come from direction, that does come from game of the year, that does come from narrative, art direction, score, and music, all these kind of things that I think are huge.
I think for me, it's a little tough though I think it's tough though, because like, why is it that these games get recognized for their directors? Oh, it's because they're huge multi-million-dollar games. You know what I mean? I think something like Ghostwire Tokyo. Yeah, that was also, a pretty big game as well. But it was smaller, right? It's published by Bethesda, so like, I guess. But, you've got someone like Shinji Mikami sort of helming it. And he wasn't even the director. It was, what's her name? The spooky lady, E3 lady. I think that, like, what I'm trying to say is, I feel that oftentimes the Game Awards it is essentially just for the biggest releases of the year. And it very rarely, in my opinion, is able to take a step back and say, like, oh, let's take a look at what happened outside of these huge major releases. You know what I'm saying?
I pulled up Metacritic just to like see like what some of their top games are.
Hold on. Metacritic round. It can be used for comedy too.
So the highest scoring game of this year is Portal Companion Collection, if you can believe it, at 96.
I can.
And then tied with that is Elden Ring, Persona 5 Royal, God of War Ragnarok, the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe, Cuphead The Delicious Last Course, Rogue Legacy 2, Neon White, The Legend of Heroes Trials from Zero, the Deathloop release on Xbox Series X, Norco, Xenoblade Chronicles. The reason I bring that list up is because it's not like these games aren't like the highest reviewed games of the year.
Yeah, that is true.
And like, I mean, there are like certain things like, you know, you can make an argument for why isn't Rogue Legacy 2 represented on this list better? Other high scoring games, Tunic was a high scoring game of this year and stuff like that. But I think there are still issues with those games. But I do think when we're thinking about review scores, I think so many of these games that review well are the ones that have more money. Because guess what? When you got more money, you can spend that money on making the game extraordinary.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things where video games are so expensive, and unlike when you're looking at a little indie film that can somehow make its way from a low budget to being an Oscar-winning film, when you're having a video game, it's much harder to get from that little indie darling to a best film or a game of the year, just because you need that money to make that game and make those choices and do that kind of stuff. So I see what you're saying, and I agree that like to me, a lot of those games on that list are just kind of like it's the same for all these categories, right? We're gonna have one of these games pick up most of them, if not all of them. And I don't know, it's still representative of the top scoring games of this year.
Sure, and that is fair, right? And I think that there is value in that, and it is warranted. Real quick, also, they added a new category this year. Did you see this?
No, what is it?
Best adaptation. And so this is for adaptation. You're laughing a little bit. This is real. It's for the best adaptations of games into like other media. So basically just like movies and TV shows. So we got Arcane for League of Legends, Cyberpunk Edge Runners, the Cuphead show, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and Uncharted the movie. Which I thought is an interesting category. Because I mean, how much do these studios like actually have to do with those things? You know what I mean? Like, it's an interesting new category that I'll be interested to see how it.
Uncharted came out this year. I forgot about that.
Yeah,
like it seems like it
February,
came out like 3 years ago. Oh my god.
Yeah, that was February.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think it just goes to show you that, you know, video games are becoming more than just video games. They're becoming major potential multi-million-dollar properties outside of just what they do for selling things. So
Yeah.